I'd like to welcome everybody, first of all, to this is the third of the Apex Standards, GBS Standards Committee's um, webcasts. And you can find the other two that we've done previously um, in on our LinkedIn page for the Apex GBS Standards Committee, and also on our YouTube channel, where we've got quite a lot of content that's been built up through these videos. Um, what I'd like to do is start this conference, and this one is about service management. So we're building up a rich discussion around the idea of a GBS construct, and uh, we're building up different parts of that GBS construct that's written up in the APX GAPS standards book. And this, in this case, it's service management, something that's described in the book as the cornerstone of the GBS construct, and something that's very close to my heart. I just thinking back this morning, 35 years ago, I worked on my first service management project as part of a GBS and outsourcing arrangement. And so I'm really interested to dig into this with Robert and Sumit. So, Robert, we've met before on the first webcast, so we won't go through the introduction. But Sumit, I'd really like to hear from you, um, your origin story. So, how you come to be doing what you're doing, and how you also came to be involved in Apex.
Thank you, Tim, and what a pleasure and honor to be here on the call today. So, those of you who don't know me, I'm Sumit. I'm the CEO of Tesco Business Solutions. Um, I actually was an accidental GBS person. I started off with the business, would you believe, running sales and commercial and contract management for a bunch of retail clients in British Telecom. And it was all destiny because I moved around the business a lot. So I moved from commercial to sales to marketing to HR to finance. So I moved around the business every sort of 18 months to 2 years and gave me a quite a depth of understanding of the kind of business end to end. And then it was way back in 2007 when British Telecom was planning sort of joint venture with Tech Mahindra. It gave me an opportunity for the first time to come to India from the UK where I was living to set up this joint venture with Tech Mahindra. And while doing that, I was able to assess Infosys, Wipro, First Source, you name it, because BT outsourced it to almost 13 different vendors in India. And it gave me such a rich understanding of how things work and how does the outsourcing industry work. And then it led to me building the first GBS in BT, which became almost 20% of the entire organization size. Uh, and then in 2017, I got the opportunity, which was a real pleasure, to run Tesco and build a GBS model. We already had a 13, 14-year-old center in Bangalore, but it was about how do we take it to the next level and build a GBS model to support all countries of Tesco Group. So, like I said, I've become accidental GBS leader, and it was really exciting. And let me now talk a little bit about what got me involved in the Apex discussions. So I see this as sort of three reasons: a strategic reason, a personal journey reason, and a leadership reason. So let me start with the strategic reason. So, when I'm very passionate about GBS, those of you know me, they'll know that I feel it's the best job on the planet. And it's a mini CEO role where you're sitting horizontal and doing all the work that a group CEO does, really, but in smaller portion. I absolutely love it. So if this was rewritten, if the standard was to be written strategically, I can't have that sitting in the sidelines and watching. So I had to be real part of thick and thin into there and set the standard with a bunch of very experienced GBS experts and practitioners. From a personal journey perspective, as I said, I do believe in this story. And I really believe that GBS is a differentiator that can create shareholder value. And therefore, personally, I want to share what I know. I want to share um, the experience that I've had since 2007. So this gave me an opportunity. And the last one, it's also for me to learn because the practitioners, the rich
Mm.
expertise, knowledge that came together, the masterminds of GBS that came together. I've learned so much just by talking to them, interacting to them, and I worked very closely with Robert on the service management piece. The amount of stuff I learned with Robert's experience, it was immense, and that gave me so much joy and things that I could learn and take it back into Tesco was really important to me. So these were kind of the three main reasons why I got involved in this.
Yeah, thank you very much. And really worthy points all. The differentiator point of a GBS and the sort of the passion in the concept behind the concept is something that's come out very clearly on all of these calls. And then also every single time that I speak to you guys, the authors of this book, I learn something every time, and I'm sure we'll all learn something here today. And if we turn to the topic of the webcast, service management, as I said at the beginning, this is like the cornerstone of the GBS construct. And now the chapter's broad and it covers a lot of points. But Robert, rather than list everything out, what features would you like to stress about the model as being particularly key?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Tim, and thanks, Sumit, for the introduction and the passion you show. And I loved working with you on the topic as well. I think that there's probably three things I want to pull out that I think personally are my favorites within the service management chapter. Um, First is at the beginning we sort of describe the questions a GBS leader or a GBS team should ask themselves when they consider taking on a new service, whether it's worth for the GBS team or the GBS leader to take that service on. And the questions we ask there are quite simple, but I think quite useful questions. The first one is, can it scale? Can whatever operation, whatever service you want to create, can it scale? Can it be beneficial for more than just one country, one business unit, one geography? Can it be beneficial for the enterprise as a whole? So can it scale is the first question that we put. The second question that we put is, can you turn it into a service? So is it more than just an operation, a department, a team, but really can you turn it into a service where there's a clear, defined input, throughput, output customer to be identified and to be set up? So can you really turn this into a service? And the third question, of course, one of the core things that a GBS team does is can you continuously improve this activity? Can you continually improve this service? And if the answer to those three questions, can it scale? Can you turn it into a service? And can you continuously improve it? If the answer to those three is yes, then you probably are looking at something that is worthy of being considered as a service within the GBS construct. So that's the first piece that we described, which I hope is going to be very helpful for GBS teams as they struggle with these questions, which I know all GBS teams struggle with every day, every week to say, look, what do I take on new? What do I do? On the back of that, we also described in the chapter, which again, I hope is going to be helpful, quite an elaborate and one could even say exhaustive list of services and solutions that Sumit and I are now seeing in the market are being offered from within the GBS construct. Very long list, very complete, I think. Again, which I hope will be helpful for teams to look at and say, hey, I didn't know that could be done as well. Let me think about it. Let me think about what that could mean within my enterprise and within my company. And then the last piece, which I think comes throughout the book per se, is this notion of whatever you do in GBS has to be in service of the enterprise strategy, in service of making your company successful. That's the essence of why GBS exists. And the same goes for service management, the service scope. So when you pick a service scope, you gotta look at scope options that actually strengthen the implementation of your enterprise strategy. And of course, that has to do with the maturity of your team, has to do with the industry you're in very much. I mean, Sumit, working in the retail industry, I've got a pharma industry background. It's different. So there's different services that are relevant in those different industries. So let's be clear about that. Let's be honest about that. Let's not try and paint everything black and white. There's many colors of scope you can have within a GBS construct. And so that relevance, that industry relevance, that enterprise relevance is also a key element that I would pull out. Now there's a lot more, and I'm sure in the next couple of minutes we're going to talk about a lot more, but these are the ones that I want to pull out at the beginning.
So look, the way I think about service management is I think about it as a CEO model. Service management is the brilliant basics. It gives us the right and seat on the table and the continuous seat on the table to do something exciting, which is about value creation. If you don't do your brilliant basics right, deliver your service, then I'm sorry, then you don't have the right to do anything. And you can serve, you can work with the organization in three ways. For me, one is about how a GBS are in service of, how a GBS can partner on certain things to create value, and there are certain things GBS should lead to create shareholder value. So these are the three buckets. And the CEO of the first bucket, which is of service to the organization, is a service management framework. So I call it the CEO model. They are the relationship managers. They should be working very closely with the markets and functions to understand what are their strategic drivers, what are they thriving on, what are their objectives, and how do we connect the business with their objectives, along with the, your head of the function, etc., who are working. So how do we work? Second, how do they have an independent voice on the table in terms of the performance standards that is expected? Because what you don't want is the headmaster marking his own homework. You almost want somebody to be independent and agnostic in terms of how the market and functions are feeling for the services that you deliver to. And then how do you bring in the right capability around GBS, whether it's the CI, the processor engineers, whether it's your RPA specialist or AI engineers, to come in and help and drive the right level of transformation that is required in the function. And finally, they should be the custodians of end-to-end measurement of your KPIs and SLAs. So rather than, obviously you're independently reporting, but also how are you the custodians of the end-to-end performance? Do you understand what input you need from the market to do your job better? If you're owning something end-to-end, and I always say this, that a GBS organization can't have a watermelon syndrome where the business is red and you are green. So you need to make sure that it's consistent in measuring the whole end to end. That becomes a really important piece. And then normally things will go wrong. And when things go wrong, are you getting an independent, agnostic view to understand what has gone wrong and what action plan do you need to place and track to understand? And finally, the most important piece is preempt and really understand the risks associated, especially what's going on around the world with all the headwinds. Do you understand the risk of your financial P&L? Do you understand the risk from a compliance and governance perspective? Do you understand on risk in terms of our colleagues? Do you understand the risk associated with delivering the outcome that we want to achieve? So how do they, as a CEO, understand all of these different facets of delivering a service and bringing the right teams in, like a typically CEO would do, to solve for the problem that we need to solve? That's how I see service management.
That's both of you gave, I mean, extremely clear definitions of this thing, and I'm going to play my colleagues some of those things you just said, Sumit, because it's such a clear explanation of why service management is at the heart of the GBS construct. I'm going to come back to something that Robert said in his points, which is about the scopes of work. And certainly, in the work I've done, including when I was working for you, Robert, I couldn't find many things that we couldn't help with. There weren't many processes where you couldn't see how GBS could make a difference. But you do have to be selective, and you do have to choose what you do. And I'm just wondering what impact the scope of work, what impact on the scope of work is there for the different industries that you work in? So, Sumit, you work in retail currently, previously, with British Telecom. Robert, you've worked in pharma and life sciences businesses before. Sumit, what impact does the industry that you're working in have on the scope of work?
Yeah, it's a really relevant question actually. And me having worked in sort of different sectors and now through my B2B business, the visibility I have. If you think about sort of each industry emphasizes on different things. So, I'm not generalizing, but let me give you some example. If you think about banking, risk, compliance, and anti-fraud, data quality, it's right at the forefront. If you think of pharma, regulatory rigor, R&D support becomes really, really key. And then retail, it's a 4% margin business for us. So therefore, there is a fire all the time. So how do you become agile? How do you think about data science? How do you understand your consumers? And how do you create a personalized offering for your consumers? How do you promote? And is it the right promotion? Are you making money on those promotions? So these are sort of different things. But I love retail because I feel there's always a burning platform because there's so much headwinds in retail and especially what goes on from a supply chain and everything. And there is almost a pull from a market into GBS perspective to say, how do we have this organization that is agile, quick to market and help us to create that differentiator in the market? So I get excited about working with retail. A lot of people say to me that, where do you get your capex from? How do you do this? You're a 4% margin business. And for me, it's about business case. It's about delivering the returns on the capex. We don't have infinite capex. So the capex that you have, how do you deliver return and quick returns? And that keeps us agile and on our toes. It's different to telecom. Telecom, we had higher margin business. So therefore, it took a lot more convincing as to say, to go to the business to say, we can add this value and we can do this. And to me in retail, the core and non-core, the conversation which I has to have in BT is blur. I do things in my GBS, which is absolute core to Tesco, like, for example, architectural design. There's no architects in Tesco, all sits with me.
Wow.
The AI and data science sits with me. So therefore, you know, there is a burning platform and it helps. And but the flip side of that is if you are not quick and fast and agile, you're too slow and you are too capex hungry, you won't have a seat on the table.
Mm.
So therefore, it helps you to reinvent yourself every year to think differently as to how you create value.
I think it's a great example, Sumit, of how you need to be business relevant in your GPS, right? And how different industries require different things. Now, if I think back of when I built my first shared service center, when I was actually working in FMCG, an FMCG company, selling into retail actually. And in that company, profit was low, but more importantly, cash was scarce. It was all about cash. Cash was the thing. I mean, we spend more time on cash forecasting, cash flow management than on P&L, gross margin, sales management. It was cash because without cash, you're bankrupt, right? That's how it goes in companies. Cash is king. And so my first shared service center I actually built was a credit management shared service center to make sure that Our friends in the retail actually paid us on time, and it was tough. It was tough. And when I contrast that when I moved into life sciences and pharmaceuticals, credit management was not an issue.
Mm.
It's not an issue because in those industries, your customers they pay because they need your product. The hospitals need your medicines, the patients need your medicines, so they pay. So credit is really not an issue. And it just there is such a stark difference from many industries where actually credit is important, cash is important, within life sciences and pharmaceuticals. Of course, it's important, but it's much less important than making sure that your R&D pipeline is right out there. I mean, the R&D pipeline is the key thing in life science and pharmaceuticals. So as a GBS, you're spending more time on what can I do to support the R&D pipeline and how can I
Mm.
support the medical team and the development team in being successful in the work that they do. So different businesses require different emphases. But I thought it's interesting to see the difference between the cash focus from one industry to the next.
Mm.
It's quite stark.
Mm. And it's fascinating. So, I mean, it does sound like the nature of the business that you are in really does impact the scope of service and the way you do it. I think, Sumit, I really like when you talked about brilliant basics is your right of entry. And then you talked about value creation as being like you have to have that value creation mindset as you go through this. And in your discussion there, Sumit, you talked about push and pull. You talked about the pull from the organization. Now, this concept of having a GBS that pulls demand from the organization has come up on all the calls that we've done. I think it's central to the GBS construct actually to get to the point where the business wants you and is asking you for things. Why is that important from a service management perspective, Robert? Why does that matter in what we're talking about here?
It is the difference between push and pull models is really one of the critical sort of evolution differentiators within the GBS, where more traditional, more sort of basic GBS teams um, come from a perspective where they're mandated by the CFO, mandated by the CEO onto the company, where the CFO or the CEO says, "Look, we're going to create a GBS, and they're going to do all of your finance back office for you, or they're going to do all of the HR back office for you, and as a business unit, you just have to accept this." So it's sort of pushed from the top down as this is what is being mandated to you. Quite a few GBSs start like that, and it's fine. It's a good way to start. I mean, in my first GBS, we also started with a mandate push model. Um, but as you evolve, you do want to move into the pool environment where, as you say, hey, your services and your solutions are actually being pulled by the business because they're helpful, because they're useful, because they're giving the business a competitive advantage in the market. Um, and 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 that is what you typically see in the more mature, the more um, the more complete GBS teams. And the difference is stark between the two. If you think of, for example, how you manage cost in a push model, cost is typically seen as a big cost center that is then allocated to the business. Whereas in a pull model, you're basically running, as Sumit already mentioned earlier about service management, well, you're running your GBS as a business. And you're not just a cost center, you actually have a P&L and a balance sheet, which means through your balance sheet, you're able to invest. Through your P&L, you're able to recover your costs and maybe make a certain agreed profit in your unit as well. And you're positioning yourself as an internal option versus
Hmm.
external suppliers. And that is something that I've done many times myself in the GBS teams that I've run, where I actually said, "Look, I can offer you these services and solutions, but Mr. or Mrs. Business, you're also free to choose an external vendor to use the same solutions. And if you find that's better, then please go there." And of course, the job for myself and my team was make sure that whatever I was offering was better and at a lower cost, right? And I think we typically did that pretty well. Um, And that, of course, gives you then a lot more flexibility from a P&L and balance sheet point of view. So the whole cost management is very different when it comes to push versus pull. The same as it is on business partnering,
Mm,
where the way you business partner in a push environment is explaining your SLAs, explaining that actually everything is green and everything's fine. Whereas on a pull model, you're really uh, uh, co-creating solutions. You're really a part of the business,
mm,
um, and you're not a supplier too, but you're
mm.
a true business partner. So the whole mindset, the whole approach also is quite different in that setup. And the same goes to how you deal with feedback. The same goes to how you deal with innovation. Very different approach in a push or a pull. And obviously, my encouragement would be for any GBS team watching, try to get yourself into that pull environment as quickly as you can. Start small, learn from that, build on that. But being in an environment where actually the business is pulling your services,
Mm.
that's where you want to be.
Very good. Sumit, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, only thing I was going to add was, sometimes what we forget when we are building GBS and service management framework is it's content and context. A lot of people focus on the content, and they hire expertise around finance or AI or whatever it might be. But what is important though is to understand the business context. How does, especially when you have people sitting hundreds of thousands of miles away and they haven't seen the business firsthand, how do you create that business context? How do you make sure people have programs that they understand, they go, they travel, and they've done number of jobs before they take on service management role. So our head of service management has been with us for almost 18, 19 years, and worked in our offices in Turkey and other parts of the world, and gained a lot of knowledge of the business, and that's really important to gain that knowledge. Once you gain that knowledge, you have the business context, and then when you have a seat on the table, you can have those effective conversations. Otherwise, how do you convert from a push to pull? Because if you are not relevant, then you don't have the right to have any further conversation. So to
Mm,
me, it's about, once you get the seat on the table, deciding what you do. Yes, your CFO or CEO has given you the push and the mandate to start with, but you can't live on the mandate, because it creates a little bit of rivalry or
mm.
animosity, because I've been pushed to do this. But then how do you win hearts and minds through building relationships, and what do you do once you get a seat on the table is really important, so that you can have those relevant conversation. How do you share the long-term plan, and understand that long-term plan, and say, okay, our contribution to your long-term plan will be this, so that they are very clear what are the dependent um, on you for, and then you keep telling them that this is what you've delivered on their long-term plan. So it makes it real, because sometimes we talk about value and dilute ourselves on cost avoidance. Or if you would have built this in US, the cost would have been this, and if you build it in India, it'll be Y. To me, that's nonsensical
Mm.
conversation. It should be around real money, real cash that you can see in the P&L, which delivers shareholder value.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I'm going to, I have a couple of questions left, but I'm very conscious that we've got quite a lot of people online watching in. And I'd really like you all to think of, if there's a question you'd like to ask Sumit and Robert, please put it in the meeting chat, because we'd love to answer one or two of your questions. So do think about what you've got to ask before we close, and I'll try and come to them in a few minutes' time. So just put something in if you have something that's burning a hole in your pocket, and we'll see if we can answer it. I'm actually going to turn to one question, last question on this concept of service management, which is whether either of you have got any stories about situations where elements of the service management framework weren't right. And it's always good to look at what was going wrong, what was the impact of that going wrong. Do you have any examples, Sumit, from your experience of that happening?
Plenty, but the simplest one I will share with you is on payroll. We've been doing payroll in Tesco for many, many years, long before my time. And when I came in, we were very proud of ourselves to say, we are all green and we're delivering 99% payroll accuracy. We are so proud of ourselves. But the questions I always ask, and people said, look, actually, we are 100% because, if the input is wrong from the stores, then what do we do? We are doing our bit right and we are 100%. And this is the typical watermelon syndrome. So one of the things I said was, can you tell me, forget about whose fault it is and who is giving the input, who is not giving the input. Can you tell me how many colleagues are impacted? They said to me around 15, 16,000 colleagues, 20,000 colleagues a month is impacted. I said, this is 20,000, we are a 400,000 people organization. So you can be very proud saying only 20,000 is getting impacted. It's brilliant. But it's unhappy 20,000 colleagues. So how do we fix that? And then we came into the bit where we said, tell you what, we are best in the retail industry. Only 4% end-to-end error because of the input error, etc. I said, that's not good enough. Even 4% is not good. That's still 6,000, 7,000 people. I'm not happy with this. So what we started looking at is, let's understand a 2080. Which 20% of the store is delivering 80% of the error? Let's work with the store managers to understand where it's going wrong. Why is the input not coming through? What are the things we can tweak from our process perspective to understand it? Can we give them a call 10 days before kind of the payroll shuts to understand if they've submitted everything they needed to shut? Head office payroll is easy because everything is fixed. But in stores, things are churning, people coming in, out, overtime, less hours. So how do you work with them to understand? And I'm delighted to say today we are what 0.4% or 0.5% error. Retail industry is about 5.5. So am I still happy with that 0.5%? No. We want to get it to as close as possible. But things happen, right? Things are dynamic in a retail world. We have to accept it. But that's, I feel, was the real, service management end-to-end thought process to solve it's not easy. We have 5,000 stores to go around and understand and do detail analysis to figure out. And people in payroll will say, that's not our job. Our job is to pay. I don't care about doing analysis and finding but it's the mindset change that you need to bring in to say, we're not going to accept mediocrity. We will accept excellence and we will do whatever analysis to fix the end-to-end problem to get it right.
And that's the service management kicking in that
Yes.
case to like it's not good enough to accept this failing. We have to go and do the thing that we need to do to stop that thing repeating.
Stretch it beyond GBS. Don't think
Yeah.
this is my microcosm and this is where I'm going to work. Your boundary is anything. The whole organization is your boundary. Go. I mean, you're not, a second class or a third class citizen. You have the same level playing
Yeah.
field. So go and play in that field and ask questions. Be
Yeah.
curious.
Very good.
Maybe one example to add on that from my own experience, which is also in the HR space, where the first time I set up a talent acquisition service, it was quite a big step in the company I did that in at the time. Not something that you saw often in the market. Typically, you used a Michael Page or a recruiter for talent acquisition. So in order to sort of go careful and cautious in setting it up, I agreed to set up a service sort of in the background and make the HR business partner the interface between the recruiting manager and the talent acquisition service. So there was sort of a three-step model there where the recruiting manager had a need, informed the HR business partner, the HR business partner translated it, and handed it over to the talent acquisition service. And it sort of went through those layers up and down. And that was set up like that from as I said, from a cautiousness perspective. The reality, though, turned out that because of that translation in the middle, we didn't get it right on the talent acquisition. Because we didn't quite understand what the recruiting manager really wanted.
Mm.
The communication flow to and from the recruiting manager when it came to the shortlist, when it came to the approach to the talents, wasn't as seamless as it needed to be. It was slow because of the step in the middle. And there with the service framework actually was incorrectly designed. And it took us a while to figure that out and ultimately to take the step to say, no, we're going to have a direct link between talent acquisition and the recruiting manager, and it'll be fine, right? And it actually got to be a lot better than by having the translation in the middle. So
Mm.
that's something we had to learn there.
We've got a couple of questions coming in, so let me build off that point, and if either of you want to take this one from ex-colleague Darren Glynn, uh, the you're talking about taking ownership over problems. So what we're talking about directly or indirectly about the key point, taking ownership over the end-to-end process, the end-to-end activity, and it's whether you've had experience of where people in the rest of your business don't want you to take that ownership and push back on it. Has there been a situation like that where, and what do you do about it? What do you do when the rest of your colleagues don't want you to take end-to-end ownership?
I mean, look, if I may sort of, that means you're not trying hard enough. You're not explaining the problem hard enough. Nobody's stupid. Nobody will sit here and say, "Tell you what, I'm going to let this burn." If you can create a business case, I remember when I was having these conversations with the business, originally with the payroll example, if I give, and a lot of people were comfortable to say, "Look, we are above the retail benchmark." So I said, okay, it's not going to work this way. So I went to my CFO and said, "Are you okay to lose this money every month?" So obviously he said no. And then he helped us sponsor to kind of drive some of those. Sometimes you have to have a real business case and you have this commitment to say you have the ability to fix it.
Yeah.
Because people will say things like, okay, we are going through a lot of business change. We don't have the appetite at the moment. We have other priorities, etc., etc. So there are lot of things that's kind of going on. But if you have a real business case to say, if you do this, the impact of this, and then this is built through track record of delivery. Your first two, when you keep knocking at the door, it'll be hard. It will be difficult doors to open. But when you've opened it and you build some track records of delivery and executing end to end, it's an open door, to be honest.
And I'm going to skip to a couple of questions just so that we touch as many of these as possible because quite a few have come in. There's two questions around skills. Skills that we should prioritize in our talent strategy for service management, and also leadership skill that professionals should have to stay relevant in the next 5 years in our space. So anything either of you have got on the skills that we need to succeed in this space?
I think in the service management, one of the skills that I would call out that I'd be looking for in people in that space is curiosity. Um, a good service manager really wants to know, as Sumit said, the context that he or she is working in, the business that they're supporting, really understand it. A good service manager really is curious about the feedback that they should be getting from the people that they're working for. And a good service manager should also be super curious around what the latest technological and process developments are in their space. So curiosity to learn all the time, I think, is a key skill for a good service manager.
Yeah.
For me, I think the common denominator in all of this, and which sort of worries me and also excites me in the same time, is leadership. To me, leadership is a probably most underused or overused words at times. And GBS leadership, what was relevant even 10 years ago or 5 years ago, is irrelevant now. The world is for the learner. The learner sit beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. So you have to always keep learning, be inquisitive, because the leadership capability has to evolve to shape the enterprise. You can't just sit there. The skills that and capability that I'm looking at, I call it skill, knowledge, and attributes. You're looking at commercial acumen. Do you understand commercially the levers that you pull and how does it impact the business? Do you have emotional intelligence to have those sophisticated conversations that you need to have with the markets so that you're relevant? The third one is, do you understand how the business runs? Because if you don't understand it, and then how do you wrap all this up with AI? Because for me, AI is developing and moving
Mm.
so fast, and if you don't understand the use cases, if you don't understand how AI would change your life, you will keep producing PowerPoints and data in terms of and keep churning data and we don't need MIS experts to do service management. We need people who know how to use AI as a tool to deliver insights and deliver
Mm.
actions. You know, uh, GBS has such rich sources of data, and it's a big crime sitting on the data and not doing anything with it. And data is only good if you can drive actions from it. Service management is about they spend all their life kind of finding the churning the data and understanding the insight. What is the data telling me?
Yeah.
That should be done by AI. And your job should be, how do I convert these insights into actions which I can track and deliver and execute? That's how the world is changing. And if we don't change that from our leadership mindset perspective,
Mm.
um, GBS will be stagnant.
If I may, just one example that I came across with a GBS team recently. They were using let's say, their ticketing system, their service management system, and all the information that they collected in that to use AI and turn it into predictive and preventative service management. Um, and by using all the data, all the information, and the AI from their ticket management system, they were, over the course of 12 months, taking down the ticket count by 50%, which means the number of incidents, the number of issues that came to their service desk went down 50% because they're able to do predictive and preventative work using AI. So it's happening now. It's really possible.
Thank you very much. We are just coming up to the end of our time. I'd like to give Sumit the last word, and it's a question I've asked you before, Robert. So, there was a really nice train of questions where we finished with being inquisitive and learning about the context and understanding the business. And Sumit, I'd just like to ask you, what's the biggest thing that you've learned personally from your involvement in Apex? You talked about that at the beginning. Is there anything that you've relearned or learned working with your colleagues on the creation of the standards and the book?
I mean, where do I start? Let me start with saying I may have underestimated the power of the GBS community and the knowledge that this community holds about different sectors, different business. Um, that was fantastic. Also, I learned that how um, giving is this industry, because if you go to any other industry, they don't share. They think about it as competitive advantage and, okay, am I losing this? Am I losing that? But this community is very giving. They share their knowledge and expertise. And I said to myself, look, I need to be right in there. First of all, to learn, but also to give. So how do I do that? And then another very interesting thing is I felt that we are all in the same storm. We are all fighting the same battles in different shape, but we're all in different boats fighting the same storm. So why not get together and go into a cruise ship
Mm.
to fight the storm rather than being in our little dinghies? So that's how I thought through. And the last one, which made me think and reflect, is I need to really override and invest on the future generation of GBS talent
Mm.
because, uh, you know, the legacy that we will leave behind is not process, it's not service management, is not a book, because that book will change every year.
Mhm.
But to me, the best legacy, the biggest legacy that will live behind is creating the future GBS leaders to
Wow.
continue this industry. And it'll be a shame on us if we don't do that.
Wow. I cannot think of a better place to leave this call than that. So I would like to thank both of you very much for what has been a really interesting and entertaining call. And I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'd also like to thank everybody that has joined the call for your participation, and I hope you have got something from it. We will be doing another series of calls in the new year. The next one will be in January, probably talking about data. So I look forward to that, and I wish you all a good holiday break as well, because after this, I'm certainly going to go and enjoy myself, as I'm sure all of you are. Best of luck. Thank you very much, Robert and Sumit, and
Thank
Thank you
take
very
care.
much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.